Good evening. The hour being after 6:45 p.m., it's my pleasure to call the January 25th, 2024 school committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have our Walpole High School student report. Mr. Patey, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. My name is James Patey, and I'm a sophomore at Walpole High School. Term 2 ended last Monday, January 22nd, and the report cards will be issued this Tuesday, January 30th. The Walpole High School PAC Committee will be meeting in the Walpole High School Media Center on Wednesday, January 31st at 7 p.m. to share information about the post-high school planning process. The college admissions process and the work-study programs will be explained in detail. A parent panel will be present to share personal tips and our experiences for navigating post-high school options. All are welcome to attend, and that it is especially encouraged that parents of younger ages attend too. The Walpole Scholarship Foundation application cycle is now open. Any Walpole resident applying for or participating in a 4-year bachelor's program, an associate degree program, or a technical certificate program is eligible to apply for a scholarship. The application deadline is February 1st, 2024 at noon. A trivia night fundraiser is being held on February 2nd, 2024 for the Walpole Scholarship Foundation. The music department is offering private lessons throughout this spring for grades 4 through 12. Registration closes January 29th. Walpole High School's work-study program is seeking donations of new or gently used hand tools relevant to various trades, such as carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, automotive, and more. Yearbook recognition ads are due by January 31st. Class dues must be paid that day in order to receive a yearbook. Clubs continue to meet regularly. The photography club met today and the theme was books. STEM Academy will be meeting on January 29th to discuss junior and senior project requirements and to check in with all grades. Hockey, basketball, wrestling, gymnastics, and winter track teams continue to work hard through the season with many ups and downs in each. We need a stronger student section showing up to support our athletes. We are hoping for a strong finish for all, and spring registration will be closing on January 29th. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any questions or comments from the committee? Thank you. I just want to amplify that note about the music lessons that are being offered. Having a 4th grader myself who started in October, I would not have expected the lessons to have caused him to sound as good as he currently sounds only in January. So that's just a little plug for that program, and I hope that people will sign up because it just makes our secondary music program stronger. So thanks for including that, James. Anything else? All right. You're welcome to stay or leave as you like.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay, going right into new business. Our first item on the agenda is a science curriculum update.
So Mimi O'Malley's present tonight to give us a science curriculum update.
Thank you for inviting me to come. I'm always happy to talk about science education. So I was going to show you a couple things that have been going on in the middle and high school, and then talk about some updates to the MCAS requirement in science. Where do I put? There we go. So during the course of this year, I've been working with the middle school teachers, getting them ready to join as one staff in the new building. We met in a full-day professional day last June and put together some new curriculum maps to help them be better aligned, and we've been revisiting those throughout the school year. We also developed some observational tools for the administration, for the assistant principals and the principals at the middle school level. Not all of them have a science background, and so this gives them a list of the different concepts that the kids should be working on by the term, and also goes over the different science and engineering practices they may see the kids engaged in the classroom. We also had a lot of fun developing equipment and material lists for the new building earlier this fall. And I just met with the middle school people this past Monday, and we were talking about some of the things we're looking forward to. One of them is having appropriate middle school microscopes. I know I was in one of the middle schools last spring, and Mr. Murphy was running around helping him focus them, because most of them had been donated, and they were from research places, and they were way above grade level, and there was no way for him to tell the kids how to focus them because he had to work them. So it'd be really nice that he can kind of give them the skills for learning how to focus microscopes by having grade level appropriate ones next year. Another thing is being able to have hot plates at each table and having the electricity to handle the circuit that, because we've been blowing a lot of circuits with the ones we have, and for all the kids to be able to use them at the same time, so in small groups, as opposed to groups waiting to use it because there's not that enough. They're also looking forward to using some wireless sensors. And not only will they be able to use them in the classroom, not being attached to an outlet, but they can take them outside with their Chromebooks, and they can collect data outside and then bring them back in. We also talked about using circuits and molecular kits, so instead of having styrofoam balls and toothpicks, they'll actually have kits that the teachers can remind them, everybody pick up a black one that represents carbon, pick up a white one that's your oxygen. So it'll be make instruction a lot easier by having a lot more uniformity in the room. And same with circuits, being able to put things together so the kids can all be working with the same pieces at the same time. Another thing that the middle school teachers mentioned overwhelmingly is that they're looking forward to being with each other. So standing in the hallway and sharing resources and saying, this lab worked great, how did it work for you? Being able to share those resources, but not having to wait till once a month when both middle school teachers meet at curriculum meetings, but being able to do it daily. That's something they're really looking forward to. So this was a lab, just to highlight a couple things we've been doing in the classroom over at Johnson. This was a density of liquids lab. So what the kids had to do is they mixed in salt to different colored solutions, and then they had to get them to layer in a very specific pattern in the graduated cylinder. So they actually calculated the density of the different ones, knowing the salinity, and it's fun to watch because they put it in and one drops below another one, and they have to restart all over to get them to layer. So it's a really nice practical application of learning different density of liquids that the kids were doing. And this was an activity I watched Mr. Murphy at Bird do just last week. The kids built these carts. It's just a piece of cardboard. It's got 2 straws taped to the bottom and skewers through the straws that are then poked through water bottle caps. And then they actually use their phones. They all had this app called Fifox, which is a great physical science app. They strapped it to the cart with rubber bands, and then they gave it a push. And they were looking to see what the effect of the force was on the acceleration. And what happened was, as soon as it started moving from the force, the app was recording the acceleration of the car. And then the kids could pick it up, collect the data point, and then record it. So they were doing, like full force, lighter force, medium force kind of thing, collecting their data points. Then they were averaging all of their trials and graphing it. And the kids really enjoyed doing it. Mr. Murphy needed a lot of room, so they were out in the hallways and around the lockers and everywhere else trying to find enough room to run their carts. But it was a great activity. The kids really enjoyed doing that one. And then at the high school, one of the new things that we're looking forward to is we're implementing a new course next fall. It'll be an Honors Chemistry 2. We don't have a whole lot of, electives for kids who are interested in the physical sciences. We have the AP Physics classes, but most of our electives are life science based. So this Honors Chemistry 2 will kind of take them into a little bit deeper into the curriculum and to touch some of those areas that they don't get to in the regular curriculum in the chemistry courses. That course follows the MAS frameworks very closely, so this course will give the instructor a little bit more leeway to explore some other options in chemistry for those kids who are interested. And we actually decided to propose this course because we had a number of kids ask if we could put together some type of a honors chemistry class. We've also been increasing our use of technology, and the teachers have really been enjoying using some of the new equipment that we were able to purchase last year. On the right side of the screen up there, that's like a 12-inch model of a skeleton, and we can put those at individual lab tables, and the kids can label all the bones instead of having just one large skeleton in the room. So the anatomy teachers have been getting great use out of those. And then the other two pictures, that's Mr. Ryan standing on his lab table demonstrating these slinkies that have a cardboard base, wooden base to them to hold them. And he's showing how they use it to do wave motion. These are really high quality slinkies, which is actually kind of important, because if you buy your regular run-of-the-mill slinkies or plastic slinkies and you have 100 kids use them, you don't use them again the following year. So these are some really high quality slinkies to be able to use. So they've been having a lot of fun with them. And then Marine Science has been using some new sensors, and they were doing a lab they were looking at the spectral analysis of different algae samples. So they were changing variables to see what would cause algae growth and what would slow it down. They were looking at the algae under the microscope, and then what they would do is they'd put it in a little tiny curvette and put it in that sensor box at the bottom of that picture. It would project light through it, and then what happened is the more light absorbed, the more algae there was, and the more the light passed through, the less algae there was. So they were basically applying the ideas of wavelength from physics into their marine science class. So Mr. O'Connor said they had a great time doing this. And then finally, this is one of the flex farms, and I know that we have some of those for the cafeteria, but we have one up in the science wing at the high school, and that's Miss Wick. She's been using it with her AP Environmental class. They've been growing plants and then using them in class. She's on her third harvest right now. So the first one, some of the kids took stuff home for Thanksgiving. The second one she offered to some of the staff. She is using it in class. And she's also one of the co-advisors of the Community Service Club, and so they are coupling with the Flex Farm to see if the kids can't bring some of the harvests to the local pantry. So she's been having fun. She's got it set up so that it's only, because it's very bright, but she's got it set up so it's mostly this time of night that it's running, and it's not on during the day. But it seems like, the sun shines all of a sudden at the end of the hallway when it's on. So there's an update to the MCAS for grades 5 and 8, and I was one of 3 people from the district that went to a training by the DESE earlier this fall. The other 2 teachers were 5th grade teachers, and we're very lucky to have all of us go, because there were districts that weren't represented. There were districts that sent 1 person, so the fact that we got 3 people there was great. Walpole is a pilot district for this new MCAS update this year for 5th grade and 8th grade. And the new assessment is performance-based. So the kids are basically looking at online simulations, and they have to manipulate them, and then they have to ask questions based on them. So there's statewide assessments, and there are those for 5th grade and 8th grade, and then there are classroom assessments which teachers can use. And Mr. Hahn and I met with these other 2 teachers this morning, and some of them have already incorporated them into their classroom. The DESE's idea was a train-the-trainer model, so we've set up some time so that these 2 5th grade teachers can then share this information with the other 5th grade teachers. And then on the Ed Camp we had in January, I offered a session, and I had a number of 5th grade and 3rd grade teachers there, and I just offered them the opportunity to kind of play with some of these assessments and see what they were like. This year, it's piloted with the districts that are doing it. The scores will not count for the kids, so they'll just be doing the actual assessment to see how it goes. And then next year, they anticipate that the whole state will be doing it. And then finally, in 25-26, that we will have, it'll count as part of their score. I haven't heard anything about third grade. I think the idea the DESE has is that start the classroom performance assessments in the classroom. These are more paper-based, and then they have a simulation. The kids can go on and manipulate the simulation and go from there. I think it's just getting the kids used to playing with these, or manipulating these online things, which is why they're starting in third grade. So this is basically what it looks like for the 8th grade. The kids open up the program, it goes through a short tutorial, and then the way this works is they read a story about these two people on scooters and how mass and force affect their rate. So they would change the mass, they can change the force, they hit start, it runs, it collects data for them, and then they could store it as a module. So up at the top there, it says A, B, C, D, and E. They can store each one. So they could change the mass, store it, and see what it looks like. They can change the force, store it. So they play with it for the first part, and then the second part, where it says Part B, that's where they answer questions. So based on the modules that they manipulated, they would answer questions going that way. So, we've talked a lot about the fact that it took us a little bit of time to get used to doing these, and we're going to be introducing them to the kids. But one of the things we mentioned this morning was that kids play a lot more video games than we do, so they may have that much more of an advantage than we do. And then just some of the upcoming statewide and national assessments. The high school has its MCAS STE for the physics in 9th grade, June 4th and 5th. That's based on all the physics they're doing this year. The AP exams start May 6th and run through the 17th. So in science, they'll be having the AP Environmental Science, Physics 1, Physics 2, and the AP Bio. And then at the middle school level, the 8th graders will be taking their STE on May 14th and 15th, and that'll include all the content they've had in middle school, as well as that new portion that they've put together. So that's what's going on in science in Walpole. Can I answer any questions?
Any questions for Ms. O'Malley? Ms.
Got a
Gallivan?
couple. I just think it's exciting how much you're doing that's like visual and hands-on as opposed to textbook-oriented.
Yep.
I think that is something that, as we were talking about, like building the new middle school and, potential renovations at the high school, I think it just makes science something more tangible to kids, and I think that's super important. When you're talking about the MCAS, will the 5th and 8th graders do a regular MCAS in addition to the new?
This year, yes.
That's what I thought you were
Yep.
saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
they'll do the regular one, and then they'll do this new portion as well.
And that's all of the kids in our 5th and 8th grade, not
Yes.
just the ones whose teacher went to the training?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Everybody.
Okay. No, thank you. Just
Okay.
thanks for your energy. It's good. It's real good.
Anyone else?
Just to add, the MCAS, that's likely the same situation for next year as well, for it to be a continuation for science. And although Mrs. O'Malley mentioned it, I do want to just make sure that I thank Alexander O'Callahan and Karen O'Neill, who are the other science ambassadors that took part in this training. These are 5th grade teachers who have demonstrated a desire to want to lead in this work. And as Mrs. O'Malley mentioned, some districts didn't send anyone, and other districts only were able to get together one person. And for us to have 3 science ambassadors, I feel like we're going to be really well prepared. And our meeting today was exciting, to discuss next steps as we prepare for really 2 years down the road when this starts to count. So I just wanted to reiterate what you already said, and thank you and both those 5th grade teachers for their commitment to this work.
Sure.
It will be really exciting to see you a year from now, and you can fill us in on all the things that are happening in the new building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
So, yeah, us too. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Next up is a vote on the tentative fiscal year 2025 budget.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Okay, so you were provided a comprehensive budget, everyone, this evening with some adjustments that were made since we met last at the request of the school committee. So I will walk through it at a high level. By no means does this do justice as to how many conversations and deliberations we've had over the past few months about our school budget. So I'll begin with the comprehensive budget on that document, starting with the personnel budget. The total personnel budget request is $47,240,000, which represents a 1.6% increase. Within our personnel budget, what's included is the collective bargaining increase, which is approximately $700,000. That is exceedingly low as compared to what we've had in the past, and that is really based on the benefits of attrition, retirements from last year that were not built into our budget, that we're able to take advantage of next year, in our budget. So that has deflated our personnel budget. It's generally about $1 million more than that, so it would be $1.7 million rather than the $700,000 we're looking at. In addition, in our budget, we've recently learned that there was a Medicaid reduction projection of approximately $150,000. That's grant funding that we won't receive, that we can't count on for charging teachers' salaries to Medicaid. So that loss of $150,000, I've added to the personnel budget, and that's what I was referring to when I said I made a recent change. That's now in that $47,240,000 budget for personnel. On the goods and service side of things, we have the budget request from the school department is $8,867,557. That represents a 3.2% increase from last year's budget, the FY24 budget. That is made up of $1,323,821,000 increase, which is really a 42% increase in our special education budget. That's mostly in part due to tuition increases as well as transportation-related increases. So that's the primary budget driver in that line item, but there are two other factors as well. We had a $160,000 or 16% increase in our yellow bus regular transportation as well as athletic transportation. And then we had a utility increase, specifically electrical budget increase of $183,000, which represents a 26% increase in the electrical utilities. A lot of that's due to our new middle school with all the technology that's there, and the fact that the HVAC systems are solely electrical driven, that you can see that uptick in there, in that budget. So to summarize it at a high level, the school department budget request for FY25 is $55,107,557, which is a $2,560,547 increase, or 4.78%. Town administrator has come in with a budget recommendation of $55,552,475. That represents a $2,005,465 increase, or 3.75. Obviously, if you look at those numbers, that creates a gap of approximately $555,082. That does not take into account one particular supplemental budget that we're expecting for fall town meeting. That's based on the Johnson Middle School rental. And because of the level of uncertainty involved with that, it would be an appropriation in the fall, assuming that we occupy that building for July 1 and that the revenue is what we anticipate for rentals, which seems somewhat likely at this point. So if you take away the $242,880 from the gap of $555,082, you're left with a remaining gap of $312,202 remaining for us to cover between now and the beginning of our next school year or fiscal year. I know it's a high level, but I know we've also deliberated long and hard on this budget, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have related to any part of our budget.
Questions from the committee for Mr. Frisha? Mrs. Gallivan?
I appreciate all that has gone into this, and I'm also reluctant to vote this number as is tonight because it's early in the revenue season, for one thing. But also because we had a really interesting strategic planning meeting this morning. And to me, it opened my eyes to a lot of very reasonable requests, things that we've talked about here that people would like to be able to do if we had the budget to be able to do it. And there were a couple of themes that stuck out to me. One was that we've been talking about trying to make more opportunities for student buy-in and allow student choice at both the middle and high school, and it would require a little bit more money. We talked about, the thing that came up probably, maybe the most, was the work-study program that's going on at the high school and how there really is a need to grow that program. But we also talked about, at least at my table, that it would be great if we could extend opportunities that are practical to all students. We talked very briefly about the idea of having like quarter-year classes as opposed to half-semester classes or full-year classes, just to give kids an introduction to some areas that they might not know much about. And the way we schedule right now, you can't really do that. But there are going to be more and more kids that are going to have trouble financially handling college, unfortunately, I think. And we were talking about giving them an intro to some job-related skills. I know from the kids that are on the robotics team that they have marketable skills that they graduate with. And it would be great if we could be offering those options to any kid. It made me think of a good while ago, we invited graduates of the METCO program back to speak to us years after they had graduated. And I remember one of the boys saying that he went into the military out of high school, partially because he knew his family couldn't afford college, especially for him and his sister. And I just think that it would be great to offer marketable skills, an intro to them, to more of our kids. Another theme that came up strongly today was about what our teachers could do if they had a little bit more time for collaborative planning. They talked about it in terms of co-teaching and how if we could improve our co-teaching model through the middle and high school, that we potentially could keep more kids in district. But in general, all the teachers were looking for that. I thought that the list of things that came up today were extremely reasonable. There was one unreasonable comment, but we're not going to be the highest paid teachers in the district, but a reasonable teacher's, they were going for the state, sorry. But a reasonable teacher's contract, I think, is another reason to advocate for the potential for a slightly larger budget than what's on paper here tonight. The governor's budget came out this week, and the numbers are favorable. They're not hugely favorable, but they're favorable, and so that's a potential source of revenue that we deserve 2/3 of. Health insurance hasn't come in yet, and unfortunately, what often happens with our special education budget is somewhere between now and town meeting, it rises. So I would make the argument that we should add, and I would say 250,000 to the proposed number that's here to help us move in the direction of some of these things. So I mentioned it and talked it over with the administration and with our chairperson, but just asked for the chance to share it here tonight to see what the rest of the committee had to say.
Shall I interject fatalism? or-
You shall.
I'm sorry, I missed strategic planning. I think that's great. I think it's important. We're so close to this budget. Every year when we talk about this, I think we should start from the beginning and talk about how we're statutorily obligated by February 1st to pass a budget. That does not link up with the state's funding cycle. So governor's budget came out yesterday. House and Senate will be in April and May. So obviously the financial picture changes. We're unable to raise the number after we vote. So we often have a higher number. There's often a gap. There's often a lot of discussions, a lot of examining, a lot of hand-wringing between first day of February and town meeting in May. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate that in our deliberations, we see there's a lot of fixed costs. I think we ticked off such as transportation, which is we have a great vendor, but we only have one vendor. There's not a lot of competition in that sector. So we're in the mercy of the market for that as well, and that continues to increase, and we'll hear about how it's increasing and affecting our athletic budget in a moment as well. So I think as we look at, we have in many venues talked about how FY25, 26, 27 may be a series of lean years for us, and when we see that a number of those sort of crunch costs are going to continue to rise, I'm sort of ambivalent about what number we pick, knowing very well that it's going to come down. And I think whether it's more drastic, come down in the weeks before town meeting, is yet to be seen. So I'm okay with the number as presented. I appreciate our Dean, Mrs. Gallivan's point that there's so many, and we have this discussion every year, sort of things on the rim or the bubble that we would love to achieve and that are have a tremendous amount of merit to them. But I just, when I look at the picture, I see we have a gap. We've worked with the town administration. The gap's in the $300,000 range. Raising that would bring it into the $500,000 range as well. I don't think we could close all of it, but I'd be interested in what other people have to say, knowing that we're probably going to have to come down another $200,000 or $300,000 between now and May. Although, generally speaking, the governor comes out with a Chapter 70 local education aid number. In better times, the House and the Senate try to best one another in increasing that. And we did just see today with cherry sheets, which are called cherry sheets because they used to be on big cherry red sheets of paper that talk about all the different types of revenue we receive, that our charter school assessment from the state and our school choice assessment is down to the tune of a couple $100,000. So that's very encouraging, but just like all the other numbers, that number will also bounce around when we get there. So I'm okay with the number we have. I'm not as optimistic, but I am sympathetic to the need to get some of these things that are right on the cusp for us. But I don't think it would matter either way, unless knowing that we're going to adjust our bottom line down before we bring it to our colleagues on town meeting. And we'll be having this conversation in 2 weeks' time with FinCom as well. So.
Other comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
This is not advocating one way or the other. I just wanted to reiterate to make sure that we state this to what Mike had mentioned. No matter what, we've got a gap now. We've got a gap of $500,000. We're hopeful that the 242 is coming in with local appropriation. And in the fall, it's still going to leave us a gap of $300,000. I also want to point out that we do need to remember that our personnel number, what was it? It's like 1.5% increase, 1.6% increase. Like that's not even like our collective bargaining, and we're using our attrition, right? So we just have to remember that in FY26, this 4.78%, will be higher. It has to. Like this budget is level funded, right? Not level service, it's level funded. And we're not asking for new staff. And I know sometimes that, we may hear like 4.7, 4.78, that seems high. I'm looking and putting together a spreadsheet of districts as their budgets are being discussed with their school committees, or we're finding out through other superintendents. And 4.7 is either average or low average when you look at other communities, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 10%. And, special education, there are 3 factors that you keep looking at, and it's special education. That's, again, the big ticket item with out-of-district and transportation, your electricity, and your yellow school buses. Those are your 3 factors.
I'm going to try one more time. I do think that the 4.7% is low. And I think that if it was March, I'd feel more comfortable, because we would know more about the revenue. I think that my back of the envelope figuring is our state aid is in the neighborhood right now, and it's too soon to count on it because we don't have all the details, but it's in the neighborhood of about 520,000 more than what was budgeted. If we could get 2/3 of that, I'm just not comfortable settling right now in January, because I think that it's our job to advocate. So, that's my last push, but I would add 250,000 to this.
Mrs. Rogers?
Can anyone do some quick math for me and tell me what the percent increase would be adding the 250,000?
All right, Mr. Business.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Half of 55.
I can voice
Yeah.
it, but I couldn't actually do it myself.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
So what are you saying about 0.4?
4%.
Yeah, but 0.4% higher.
Okay. Which sort of brings us a little bit more in line with, still on the lower end, but about
Yeah, I have to finish
Right.
doing the,
Budget.
just started looking at other districts, because they're just starting to discuss their budgets.
that it feels reasonable. But I,
If we had
That
fully,
percentage.
if we had a full personnel budget request as we traditionally do, you'd be looking close to 6.5%
Okay.
versus the 4.78. That's a realistic
to fill
snapshot.
that gap.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Buckley?
Through you, Madam Chair, I know we're getting absolutely hosed on electricity costs. We talked about, I know we're in, transit's important for us to kind of register for the wider community. We're aggressively looking at covering all of our buildings with solar panels, and we're in current negotiation to do that. What would the revenue timeline be? Would we be seeing something maybe in Q3 or Q4 of next year?
For solar?
For solar.
It's hard to estimate because we have to still hash out an agreement, a PPA agreement,
Mhm, yeah.
power purchase agreement, and then once that's in place, they've got to move forward with the installation. The incentives for us, because of where we are, if we go with the current vendor, is very favorable. If we go with a different vendor, we fall into a different set of incentives that will drop the returns on that. But I'd say we're probably a year off from.
Yeah, so it's really, it's a
solidifying.
26.
Right.
But it is, what was it, $181,000 increase, something, that's 25%.
Right,
It's,
right.
that's half your, more than half of your gap right there.
Correct.
So I would just say, we knew that things were tight this year, and then with the news we got about Medicaid reimbursements being 1/3 lower than what we were anticipated, things got tighter. And when things are tight, it doesn't make our wish list go away. The needs obviously are still there. Our desire as a school committee to advocate for the needs is still there, but the means aren't in this moment in time there for everything that we would like to do. And if we're realistic, next year will likely be even tighter, I think, based on what we know right now. And so I don't really want to lock us into a budget that is going to constrain our opportunity to grow. At the same time, you know, the expectation for level funding has been set for all town departments, including the school department. And I think that I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Buckley in terms of, like, I don't see this number shrinking dramatically. I do think that, you know, I'm optimistic about the funding coming in from on the municipal side in the fall. And if that number ends up being higher than 242, I would like to have a serious conversation about, you know, those funds at that time, helping us close our gap. I also think it's incredibly likely that we may need to ask for a transfer in the fall if our special education costs come in higher than what we're, the already fairly high number that we are anticipating. And I think that it's been a while. I mean, I've been here several years. It's been a while since things have looked this tight. And I think it's motivating all of us to think really long and hard about our budget and our budgeting process and figure out where we can fight some fights and get some wins, solar being one example, right? Like, where can we put our energy to make this, to loosen this up a bit, whether it's advocating with our state delegates, which Mrs. Galvin has done a lot of work lately to make sure we have opportunities to do that in the very near future, whether it is finding efficiencies, going after grants, anything that we can do, I think we're willing to do. We're willing to put the work in to do it. But I also think we have to position ourselves well to fight this fight next year, and continue to make sure that we're always centering the students where possible. It's just that some years this conversation is tougher than others. And that would be my 2 cents. Mrs. Cyrek.
I agree. I think it's challenging because we have been really lucky a lot of years recently, and we have some bigger asks that are coming. And I feel like sort of hoping that things are going to look better and trying to ask for a little bit more, hoping that a little bit more is going to come in, is, I think it's a little difficult to do right now. I agree on the special ed piece that, you know, we just don't know, and maybe we could use more for special ed, but that again is just this great unknown. I think some of the things that came up in this strategic plan are great ideas, and I think that the cycle and the timing make those great ideas something that we can't look at this year, because we didn't talk about those with leadership or, you know, when we all met a week or so ago. So I think this is a year that we just kind of have to settle a little bit, and it's still, you know, a decent ask, and I think there are a lot of things on the horizon, positive and negative, but we can't, just as we can't always plan to tighten our belt, but we can't always plan to have the income. I just feel like we have to go with what we know right now.
Mr. Buckley.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you corrected. The additional funding conversation very well could be moot, but I don't think any town officials elected look at the town budget as aggressively as we do from as many angles. So if something broke, let's say, well, whatever it may be, in the fall, and there was an opportunity to make a case, I mean, there's nobody better, especially, you know, our colleague Nancy, at making the aggressive case for additional funding in the fall. And I wonder if, going forward with the number we have now, the overall 5.4 number puts us in a better position to do that than asking for a higher number. Again, knowing numbers going down over the next 3 months anyhow. So I agree with everything that's been said, but I would be supportive of the lower number. And if, I don't know, Mrs. Gallivan, did you make a motion for the higher number, or?
It doesn't sound like there's a second. Can I just ask, I have not looked into the charter, and I don't know that we can't raise our budget later, but if revenue is in,
Well, I think that's just it. It would be in the fall, if through your point is well taken, the 284 that the town has offered to inject in the fall from rental income as, that,
That's built
That's a-
into the number we're voting
Right.
tonight. So the question is, if state aid goes up, or if the health insurance numbers come down, are we going to be told, this is what you asked for, this is what you get?
no, I understand, okay.
So, and I don't know, I didn't have time to look at the charter carefully enough.
What do you think, Mike?
I'd have to look at the charter,
Yeah.
but I think the most that you would get, to Nancy's point, would be that 300, approximately 300,000, and you'd have to stop there. Unless you, I mean, potentially, maybe you could add something to that, the fall town meeting appropriation. That might be another option. We're going for the 242 anyway. Could we add to that to request supplement to our budget outside of our original budget request? I'm just offering it as a counterpoint.
I would say we would probably be in a stronger position to do so because we would be looking at real numbers, both our own costs and how they may change, particularly with respect to special ed, but also the revenue coming in, and things like health insurance, et cetera. We'd have real numbers in front of us, and I think that would help us make a stronger case
And
at that time.
we've had bad special ed years, and we've gotten additional funding, and that's got to be over and above appropriation, right? Yeah, it must. I would think. Or
would
circuit
think so.
breaker came,
I would
circuit
think
breaker
so.
came in lower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said this was going to be my last one, but this will be my last one. Last year was the only time that we did not get state aid until the fall. I think it was a dangerous precedent.
Oh, yeah.
I think that we should be arguing for it. And I don't love the let's wait till the fall idea. But that's my last point. And I'm not making a motion unless, if somebody wants to make it, I'll second it, but I don't think
Others
that's a
on the end
second.
What's that?
You got your hand up, so maybe.
No, I was more asking for clarification. So basically, what you were saying, Carrie, is voting on this as it stands potentially, and then asking for more funding later, like in the fall through town meeting. Is that right? Like trying to increase what the town is giving us?
My feeling,
that gap?
yeah, well, we're being asked to take a gamble here.
Right.
That the JMS rental agreement will come in at a number sufficient to fill this, part of this gap.
And on
Right.
time.
At that, on the timeline that we want, right. And so I would think the other side of that coin is if revenues are greater than anticipated, that should also be on the table for the split that we typically see with municipal revenues, because, that seems only reasonable and logical to me. And I also think, Mrs. Gallivan isn't wrong to suggest that, like, there's a very strong possibility that some costs come in higher, in particular with special ed, because we just don't know. Anything can happen between now and the end of the year. So, and I do think that I would be very surprised to have to battle over that, because that's just a mandate that we have to deal with, right? That we don't really necessarily control. Yeah, and I'm not, I tend to agree that waiting until the fall is less than ideal and not a great way to do business in the long term. But I also think there's been a lot of movement in how the town side is budgeting this year, in particular to ensure that we don't have to shelve the high school project entirely following the tri-county vote. And so that makes me hopeful that, I just think a lot of things are in flux right now. And I think that we can be very clear in saying we don't really like this as a precedent, and this is not how we intend to carry forward for years to come. But this year, it may just be the way that things have to go.
Karen?
Yes.
All right, 2 questions. One, I agree, and I think that's part of my point with Tri-County, right? I think the town is being generous and trying to work with us on the high school, which is why I don't want to put in a bigger ask. But here's the question. So let's say we vote the higher number with Nancy's thing, right? Nancy's ad. Town says no, whatever, we have to come down, right, if we do it today. So then what's the difference if we say we're gonna vote this and ask for 500 in the fall instead of the, 242, we add the money there? Like is there a difference in the ask if we say we're gonna ask for it all now with this total budget number, or we say we're gonna ask for it with assuming this is gonna come later? I mean, is there a difference in the approval or the discussion if we, take a bump in the fall?
The one thing I would add to the fall town meeting appropriation, sometimes it's misconstrued as one-time money to support your budget. The implication here with the 242 is that that's not one-time money, like that's recurring. So
Sure,
not
it
only will
starts
you
the
give that to us
recurring.
in the fall, you will continue to fund that going forward as part of our base budget. You would have to clarify that and make sure that that's
Right.
understood, that this is ongoing funding going forward. That's the only distinction I would draw
Okay.
on that.
Yeah, and I think the reason why this coming year it would be an appropriation in the fall is because this would be this summer, ideally, in theory, is when the lease agreement starts, and that lease agreement would be in place for at least 10 years, and we would know that that was recurring revenue and therefore can be built into the base budget. It's not one-time money. It's just more of a timing thing with this particular budget cycle because of when the lease starts. I mean, to answer, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, to answer it in a different fashion, through you, Madam Chair, if we grow our base budget and revenues continue to be flat, it's just a bigger hole in '26.
Sure.
So which gives us a large amount of ground to continue to do level services. Level services, if things plateau, get more and more expensive to deliver.
And I think that the answer to your question about the difference between asking now and asking later and the amounts being different, just to reiterate, like the discussions we're having now are based on numbers we know now
Right.
or have a solid idea on now, right? And I would like to think that conversations we have in the fall would just be better informed conversations because we have more information at the time. Just asking now is not. It's rooted in the idea that, like, we always need more, right? We always need more and we can always find a use for it. But it's not necessarily, to my mind personally, rooted in a data point like Medicaid reimbursement is down 150,000, right? And I believe that FinCom is very receptive when we can say, we can demonstrate the data that says, here's why we have this need that we weren't anticipating. And I think that they appreciate when we approach them in that way. Mrs. Gallagher.
Just to answer your question also, Kristen, the 242,000 is built into the number that.
Sure.
So if we're thinking about 300 in the fall, that would be another reason to bump it up. But the 242,000 is part of our
It's
request.
specific for the
yeah.
rental, yep.
It is. Thank you for clarifying that. Mr. Buckley?
Given this robust financial discussion, I would make a motion to approve the FY25 Walpole Public Schools budget for the amount of $56,107,557.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mr. Breen. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? 510. Thank you. And we will hope that as this funding picture reveals itself, maybe the conversation will get easier. Keep your fingers crossed. Stay tuned. Next on the agenda is a preschool tuition discussion with Miss Martin.
Good evening. I am here to request from school committee an increase to the preschool tuition for 2% per year over the next 3 school years, for the years 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. You have a table in front of you outlining what those fees would be, what those tuitions would be, and this is based on a few different factors. One, when you'll also have a table there comparing tuitions to communities surrounding us that are similar program, that offer similar hours. And we're either in line or a little bit even below what the tuitions are of other communities in our area. So that's one reason, and then the other reason is just, as all of you are aware, and you've been very supportive of the preschool in my time here, which I appreciate, is that the growth of the preschool continuously year after year, and having this tuition increase will help support just the growth of the program overall and the students, and we think that doing it for 3 years would help as opposed to coming to you, year after year. So we think this is reasonable based on the numbers, and it's still, even at the end of the 26-27 year, still keeps us aligned with the communities around us, who similarly, it varies as far as how other communities choose to increase their tuitions. I've done some digging into that, and it's not really, there's no real standard there, but it does keep us aligned with the communities around us and for the program that we have. So that's the request. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Comments, questions? Bless you. Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd make a motion to approve the Dana Feeney preschool tuition for the next 3 years as presented by the director. Tuition increase for the next 3 years as presented by the director.
Second. Motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mrs. Rogers. Any further discussion? I would just note that at our public hearing for the budget last week, that was where this conversation initiated, and so it may seem like a quick decision, but it's something that we discussed last week, and to Ms. Martin's point, it does bring us in line with how most area preschools operate. So, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have an athletic department financial update with Mr. Dowd.
Hi, excuse me. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here tonight. Most everybody I know, but my name's Ron Dowd, athletic director here for 9 years. Nice to meet you. I want to say that, over my 9 years here, the support of the parents, the community, the school department, the coaches, the booster clubs, it's amazing. The collaboration that the department has with these organizations is special and truly unique, and it can only exist in a town such as Walpole. Over the past 9 years, the landscape has certainly changed in many things. I don't remember on my interview questions being asked about navigating through COVID or anything like that. But we did that, and, through that, we saw some increases. Another big increase that we've seen, big change, I should say, is in how the MIA does their tournaments. They no longer do sectionals, and they're now statewide, which brings in a lot of different, challenges. Seedings are no longer done by record, but by a power seed that includes strength of schedule as well as goal differential. So along with the rising costs, this has been the biggest change to the high school athletics over the past 9 years during my time. Fortunately, having worked with Dr. Goff and especially Mike Frischer during these times, we've been able to navigate these obstacles pretty successfully. Having said that, I understand that this is a tough time, especially listening to what I just listened to. So this is probably the second to last thing that I would be coming here to ask for during this time. But in order to sustain the excellence and meet the needs that Walpole High School has within the athletics, I think that this is a time that, we can sit here and talk about these things. The last time that the user fee was raised was 2015. And during that time, surrounding towns as well as other schools in the Bay State Conference have raised their user fees once, if not twice. So without further ado, 2022-2023 costs. On the left-hand side, you can see that the total, that includes user fees, gate receipts, MIA receipts, which I'll go over in a couple seconds, and user fee checks, so user fees. That total comes out to, $288,097. On the right-hand side is just a sample of some of the expenses. I've grouped some together to make it simpler. Supplies, for instance, that's, balls, helmets, reconditioning, nets, athletic training supplies. Game personnel, that is, people who work the games home and away. Those are also, people who take tickets, for me as well at the games. Huddle is something that we instituted a few years ago. It's an online platform that takes takes videos of the games, breaks them down, and helps the coaches coach. We've installed a camera out at Turco Field and one in the gymnasium as well, so coaches are able to tape practices and go over practices with their teams. This is, it's a game changer for those coaches who are able to use them, and they'll also be able to send clips to colleges for recruiting purposes if need be. So that's what Huddle is. The Impact is a baseline test. For those of you, who have kids who've gone through the system, it's a baseline in the event that someone sustains a concussion. They're able to revert back to the baseline and, be able to help them get it back on the field, when it's safe to do so. So those are things, especially the Impact, the MIA used to take care of that way back when. Then they did half, and now it fully revolves, it goes to the school. Expense increases, over this time, it's been a lot. Officials, they go up on the left-hand side. When I started in 2015, an official for a varsity game, and you can pick the sport, they're pretty much all the same, is $79. That's now up to $95. On average, that's $16, obviously per ref. So the basketball game tomorrow night is costing $32 more today than it was in 2015 to just run that same game. On the right-hand side is yearly expenses. Buses, in 2015, a trip to Norwood, which is the minimum trip that we take. We go over there, they go for 4 hours. It was $295. That's now up to $450. Impact, as you can see, has gone up. Family ID, which is online registration, is up to $1970. Hockey was $325 an hour. It's up to $400 an hour. The athletic training, back in 2015, we used MGH, so they weren't here full-time. We're privileged and enough to get a full-time athletic trainer, and that cost is $48,745. The first few years of that time, we won a grant that took that right off the table. The grant paid for that fully. Now it's in our budget, it's in the athletic revolving account, it's invaluable. Amanda does a wonderful job, and I couldn't, I always say she runs the department. I'm just there behind the scenes. The Bay State Conference has gone up, MIA has gone up. I use tennis balls because this was presented to Dr. Goff. And it's something that she can relate to is tennis balls. But I very easily could have chose soccer balls. Back in 2015 was $37.50. That's now $53. Baseballs was $79. It's $83.50. And, for athletic tape, as one example of what Amanda will get, was $48.96. That's now up to almost $56. And we use 20 boxes of tape roughly per year. Things on there like lax balls, hockey pucks, I didn't put on there because those are things that over my 9 years, I think we've bought maybe 4 or 5 boxes, so I just didn't think that was tangible. We still have 2 boxes of hockey pucks in my office and a couple of boxes of lacrosse balls back in the cage. And I've been able to stuff with, like, say, lacrosse balls. I run the MIA tournament, and anytime the MIA has an extra couple of balls lying around, we take them. So, been able to help out with that regard. Buses, as you can see, you know, we've spent, and I went back for the last 3 years, we've been budgeted for $79,000. We've gone over that, 86.5 with the help of Mr. Frischer. He's been able to help me out in these categories, but we're still going over that. Mini buses, as you can see on the bottom there, you know, I'm forever grateful that you were able to give us 2 mini buses, one to start, and this is the second year with the second one, and we're starting to see help with that. Not only are we seeing it as a monetary thing, but, you know, in cases, you know, like today, the track buses couldn't get here. We're able to take those in town and cancel one bus and get the kids on that. A few weeks ago, you know, the buses weren't going to get there till 4:30. The games are starting at 4 o'clock. We've got to get people there, and these buses are coming in. But from a monetary point, you know, it's helped out tremendously. I thank you for that, and I know that, you know, freshman basketball, they take the buses over to these other schools, and I can assure you that the other ADs in my league who aren't there till 9:30 because we can't get a bus, they thank you for funding those as well, because they're able to take those buses and get there and start those games at 3:45, which then in turn gets our kids back to school and can get ready for the next day. Gate receipts. In the fall, right now, in 2015, we charged for all night games. Currently, we do not charge for any game but football. That includes senior nights at all during the fall. Football is the only sport that we charge from. You know, try to encourage kids to come to games as much as we can. And, you know, I feel that parents are taxed out as much, and, you know, kids are taxed out. So if we can help out in this small regard, we will. The question comes is, you know, how do we make up the difference? You know, one of the differences, and we talked about, I mentioned changes. Back 15 years ago, when we made the tournament, we would go to a neutral site right away. Now, if in the round of 32, the round of 16, and the round of 8, it goes to the higher seed. The round of 32, I do not charge for still. Okay, you know, again, you know, parents are taxed out. I recognize that, and you know, it just, I just don't feel like that's something that we should be doing. The round of 16, the round of 8, the MIAA takes that gate and then cuts us a check, depending on how many people we have coming to the game. Also, the last few years, I've been able to supplement this by hosting games. We hosted, 2 years ago, we hosted 2 state semifinal soccer games and 3 state final soccer games on Turco, and a semifinal football game. Those were roughly about $9,000 that the MIA gave us in addition. During that time, I do have to pay for game personnel and officials, but I look at that as an increase that can make up for charging parents, our own parents, that are coming to games. Luckily, I have great employees, Lori Wilson, Paula Mazzarelli, Courtney Notabad. Those 3 in particular will be working for me all the time. They come out, they work the games. But it's just a way that we can help. 2015, for instance, we took in $32,021. Last year, with the help of the gate, in addition to this, we took in just about $30,000. So, you know, it's really negligible, and not charging. In the winter, again, the MIA, you know, gives us the 32, the 16, and the 8. For the 32, we do charge, you know, especially because we're using Rodman Arena. So we keep it consistent. We charge for hockey, we charge for basketball. You know, we've been successful, and, you know, last year, for instance, boys hockey, girls basketball, we hosted the round of 32. Boys and girls basketball plus boys hockey, the round of 16, and boys and girls basketball, the round of 8. You know, that's good. That's yearly money coming in. Also, we're not using buses to go away, but obviously that's something that we can't count on a yearly basis, you know, having those teams be successful. In the spring 2000, you know, it's the same thing. Last year, we hosted girls and boys the round of 16, girls in the round of 8, and then we hosted 4 state semifinal games which gave us another $4,800. You know, again, you know, right now, I help run the boys and girls lacrosse. You know, that might not happen in 5 years. They might say, you know, or whatever, they might say, Ron, get out, we're gonna get somebody else. We might not get those semifinal games. They might say our facility's too small. I don't know, I try not to figure out what the MIA wants to do on a yearly basis. But, you know, luckily, we've been able to supplement those, but certainly counting on those on a yearly basis also is something that, you know, we don't want to be doing. Booster Club needs, these are things that, you know, I meet with the Booster Clubs yearly. I talk to them out in the fields. I talk to parents, and these are things that, you know, I hear from them that they've brought up over the past. You know, helmets, field nets, masks. The AT, you know, stuff on the bottom, those are things that I've asked Amanda over the last few years. She's asked me, you know, to get these things. You know, at this point, we have not. Most of those things above Amanda, for the most part, we have been able to fund through the athletic department. Track, for instance, we just got another net for down below for the shot put. We've been able to get mats. We've been able to get nets for both the field hockey, the soccer teams, the ball machine from the tennis. You know, we've been able to fund those through this department. That's getting tougher and tougher now with those other things that we've talked about. The one big thing that people at Booster Clubs have asked for is uniforms. That when we did the rebranding, you know, we as a school picked this up. It was roughly about $55,000 to do all uniforms. You know, the only uniform we did not do, because they had Walpole on it, but we made it up. We bought mats for them, was the track team. Okay, so we made it up and working with the Booster Club on that. This next thing is coaching positions, requests. You know, we have a lot in the budget right now. You know, and I listed these in order of, I think, priorities. Right now, the track and cross-country team, we do have a JV team, but we only have a varsity coach. You know, those numbers are been pretty consistent over the years, maintained. You know, the track program is one of the finest programs that we have as far as the coaches and the involvement and the kids. You know, and I'm not just saying that, but, you know, yeah. But that is the truth. You know, anybody who comes to me who says, what can my kid play? I point them in the track direction. I've never had anybody say, you know, I wish you didn't do that. You know, and that's why their numbers stay pretty consistent all throughout the whole years. So, you know, these are positions that, you know, I fully support. Boys volleyball is something that we are looking to kick off, and, you know, we would be right now the only team in the Bay State Conference who does not have a team, and an assistant football coach, because their numbers, again, have stayed very consistent throughout the years. User fee history, like I said, this is the first time in 9 years that, you know, coming and asking. In 2014, 2015, the first and second sport was 200, the third sport was 100, and the family caps was 11 and 500. From 2015 to current, we went up to 2,225. The third sport went to 50, and we kept the family cap and the individual cap as the same. You know, this is something that, you know, we've talked about. I've asked around. Many towns went up. Okay, and when they went up significantly, you know, a while ago. So in order to avoid this talk that we're having, a town like Braintree, it was interesting to find out that they go up 2% every single year. You know, so you know, we've been very fortunate. I can't thank Mike Fisher enough for helping support me and the department through this. Most importantly, I can't thank the Booster Clubs, you know, for helping, you know, fund these things as well. So without them, you know, I think this conversation might have been happening sooner, but again, I can't thank you enough, Mike, and the Booster Clubs. This slide is just an area of, a quick overview of towns around, towns in the Bay State Conference, and in other surrounding towns, and what they charge for user fees. Some of the bigger towns, and there's quite a variance there, as you can see. Like I said, a town like Braintree, they go up 2% now every year, so that per student sport will be going up. A town such as Weymouth, they use, different criteria for football, different criteria for hockey. Their user fee is still around $200. They being a city and so forth, there's a lot more businesses and revenue coming in for them as well. But certainly, where, if we raise it by 25, I think we're still right in the medium of everybody in the surrounding towns. Last slide is, a proposal. It's a variety of proposals. I would like to reiterate that I realize that, times are tough, and this is the last thing that you want to do is go up on anybody. And, I have a 10-year-old at home. They just went up $15 on his flag football for the fall. But I understand that. It's unfortunately the cost of doing business nowadays and being in a school. So like I said, this is the second to last thing that I'd want to do is to raise a user fee. The last thing that I would want to do is tell a team like the field hockey team who got a game against Uxbridge, the only team that beat them this year, that they can't go to Uxbridge and play them because we can't afford to go. Playing those teams are very important to the success, not only in the moment, but the success for ratings and seedings, and, to grow your programs. The coaches and I, we sit down before every season, we talk about non-league games, and, my coaches that we have, they're great. They're not just coaches that I don't feel like they work for me. A lot of them, we're friends, and we sit down and we talk, and we try to keep the games as local as we can. But there's something to be said about, the field hockey team going to Uxbridge to play a game against the eventual Division IV winners. There's something to be said, especially now in a statewide tournament, kind of getting on a bus and going to a town like Grafton, like the lacrosse teams are going to do, far enough, but not yet far enough, but yet on the other 4 or 5 non-league games, they're going to Westwood, they're going to Foxborough, they're going to Medfield, they're going to towns around, so preparing them for the tournament to give them the basic, things to be successful is those things that you wrestle with. But we try to keep them local as much as we can, but, also recognizing that there are some challenges in there, as well. Obviously, my job is to be visible during, after the school day, and, I've talked to many, many people around, parents, and we've had these discussions, and they've come to me and they've talked, and, certainly, a lot of parents have said to me, I coach a sport that those parents are out there, fundraising year-long. Okay, and I can't thank him as a coach enough to be doing that. I also know that they're spent, and parents have said to me, Ron, I'll give you $300 if you could just take the uniforms and we can cut the fundraising down 50%. I don't think at that we got to go that drastic, but certainly raising it $25. And here there's 3 proposals. The first one is to help fund the cost of the buses, an additional $20,000. That would free up about $20,000 in the revolving account, and some more, some money would still be coming out of the revolving account for buses. We recognize that, but that would certainly help free up some additional money. Going up $25, whether it's in phases, 10 to 15 to 20, 25, or 15 to 25, or just going to 25, but there's about approximately 900 kids who played last year, and just doing the math quickly, that's what it would come to. And then lastly, it would be the third sport user fee, bringing it back up to $100 to start with, and then, if if we go to the 250, bringing it back to where it was exactly half at 125 for the third sport. I will also say that, during my time, I recognize that kids have challenges, parents have challenges paying. Those kids we work with 100%. In my 9 years, we've never held an individual out for failure to pay or cannot pay. That's something that, we don't believe in. We work out agreements with them. I've had kids help me set fields up, just, do things. But, even by raising this, I guess my point is that still is the expectation, is that we will work with these families and make sure that they're on the athletic fields, because it is important. So,
Coach, what's your proposed family cap or individual cap?
so that would then go up to another $50, I would propose.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from Mr. Duff? Mr. Buckley?
You, Madam Chair. I have driven by recently the MIA headquarters, their brand-new one, so you steal as many balls as you want from those guys. And get our money back one day at a
What I
time. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming, Coach. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did send through Mike Frisha 7 pages of questions to you about this budget, being a good JV washout that I am. So I think this is good. This is a good starting point. And as I try to understand the four corners of this matter, I think we get it. You sat here for the first part of our meeting. We're having trouble with our own budget, and a lot of the same things that are difficult for us are difficult in a microcosm with the athletic budget, i.e. transportation again. One vendor, great partner. There's no market competition. We're not benefiting from that at all. It is good to hear that we're aggressively using the smaller buses for the reasons, that's why we bought them, and hoping to somehow defray the cost in the same way we bought our own special ed transport buses, because, again, one vendor, a difficult and rising thing there. For me, I wouldn't want to vote on this tonight for a couple of reasons, and I think for the reasons you talk about, like I'm the softest touch there is when it comes to fundraising, and there's a few folks in town who know that very well and are very good at shaking me down, and I think that the boosters do
On television.
I know, well, most of them got me anyway, but that and Girl Scout cookies, I'm also great at Girl Scout cookies, clearly, but I think the boosters do such a tremendous amount of work, and the point you raised is well taken, that if perhaps we didn't require folks to fundraise all year, basically, for some of our larger sports, I think that's a very valid point. But for me, I think it will be helpful, and I saw in our packet, we got a little more information since you first put this together, which was great, to really, get our arms fully around at what point does Walpole Public School funds stop for each of these sports, and booster funds start, and donations. A lot of these sports have a number of great coaches, and a couple are paid by us, a couple are paid by boosters, a couple are, in some cases, donating their time, which is all wonderful. It's a testament to the tremendous program you have here, that and the fact that we have kids here to talk to us all the time, having won state championships and divisional championships. So it's clearly working, the athletics part of it. I think, for me, when I look back at, I was not here when we raised fees on 2015, but I was in 2011 and 12 when we did. I think a good course of action would be to send a couple of my colleagues, I'm happy to do it with a group of less than 4 of you, to sit down and meet with sort of the booster presidents and maybe a couple folks from each of those groups, and just have that discussion, because that's what we did 10 years ago when we made a pretty significant increase in athletic fees. Because unfortunately, this is a great proposal. It seems to meet the athletic deficit, the athletic transportation deficit we have today, but looking at your numbers, looking at the numbers we have here, I don't think that deficit is going to plateau. I think it's going to continue, and we should have a really, not that you haven't, but I think we, as the people who are going to raise the fees on parents, should have a really honest kind of face-to-face discussion with all of them to say, what is your appetite? Because we may need to raise these fees significantly to continue to provide the level of services. And in order, I think for me, from my perspective, in order for us to have that conversation, I'd really like to get my hands around, like, how, what's what percentage of X sports budget is booster funded versus just well-meaning community direct donation versus our own budget. So I think those things are important for us to maintain the high level of this program, but I think the conversation has to be had, because there's a lot of options on the table here. When you gave us your fee schedule, a lot of towns have a bifurcated schedule. Football and hockey, you pay a higher user fee, and I think that's something we should think about, but I don't want to think about it in a vacuum. I'd like to think about it with sort of the leaders of the, hear from the coaches as well, but especially the leaders of the parent groups that are raising all this money before we make a pretty, I think, possibly a very large increase in the student fee, larger than anything else we did. And the other, my final thought is, the last time we did this, when I was here, we also, to a lesser extent, raised activity fees, in this, being cognizant of the fact that that's sort of the other side of the student activity experience. I think it was maybe a third of what the athletic fees were, but that might be something to think about as well, to if as our costs continue to rise, if we can sort of do that in a more across-the-board fashion. It might be something we want to think about, given the fact that we have an almost $500,000 budget deficit tonight. So, I mean, I agree with all the stuff you propose. It's very clear that the costs are going up for everything. I just think, as we gather more data in the next month or so, I'd love to have that discussion, and then I'm assuming well before town meeting, we would make a proposal probably for a robust increase after taking all that feedback in, and hopefully being able to address some of the boosters' concerns and needs as well. But that's just my 2 cents.
Cyrek, and then Mrs. Gallivan.
So I have a question about the athletic enrollments.
Sure.
It looks like there are a couple of sports that are missing.
Yeah, so I couldn't really have, because those are cut sports, so it was
Oh,
tough
okay.
to put those in there.
Okay.
I could tell you how many kids signed up.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
like soccer's a cut sport. So
Right,
they cut kids.
girls volleyball is a cut sport.
Volleyball's a
Okay,
cut
yeah,
sport,
I was curious to why.
and so forth.
Okay, so these are just the non-cut sports?
These are the non-cut sports.
So I'm really glad you mentioned the Boosters Clubs, because I think we wouldn't have a program if it wasn't for the Boosters Clubs. And I think that, as somebody who also sent you a whole bunch of questions, I still have some, but I think it's just super important before we do anything. I'm not ready to vote tonight either. Before we do anything, to really have a face-to-face with the people who are doing the fundraising, because we're expecting a lot of them. And on the other hand, I would want to hear directly from them whether they would rather keep doing the fundraising that they're doing and more, or if they feel like the athletic fee is something that's going to be manageable. In what we were hearing at strategic planning today, again, you're looking at the good side of a coin, but the goal should be to remove athletic fees, remove all fees.
Agreed.
We're not in any position to be having that conversation, obviously. But I would suggest that we plan a meeting with a subset of us to get more of the questions fleshed out, and then schedule something with the head of the Boosters Clubs, for hopefully all the clubs and the coaches, to have a group meeting to discuss it further, because I have some of the same questions that Mr. Buckley brought forward, and I know you answered some of mine, but we've got still have questions to really understand, I believe.
Mr. Breen?
I would propose, whatever we do, that we keep the family cap as low as we can. Right. I don't know that raising the family cap is going to raise that much more money for us, but if we don't raise it, it's going to be meaningful to the families that don't see their fees go up. So it's a lot to pay $1,100 for your kids to play sports in any given year.
And typically, your kids are clumped together.
Right.
So, you know, it costs a lot at that point.
How about the coaching positions? Are we going to vote on those tonight?
Questions? Seems like that probably needs to be part of the discussion, so the sports in question, boys volleyball, what season would that be?
That would be the spring.
Spring. Okay. so
Spring this year, spring?
So we've done 2 years of like club intramurals type of things. And, you know, this would be the third season. Last year, they had a scrimmage, they scrimmaged Milton twice. I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, you know, but this would be the first year.
And so if we were, in theory, to vote to approve that tonight, would that take effect for this coming spring season, or that would be the spring of 2025?
The hope would be this season, but, you know, we've put a temporary schedule together with the Bay State Conference, and we've put a concrete, you know, with and without us.
Would it be fair to say that the boys volleyball players are hoping to be varsity this year?
They are.
Yeah,
I would say
yeah.
so.
Sure they are. Mrs. Gallivan?
The rules, as I know it, are you have to self-fund for 2 years at the varsity level. So, you know, I think we should get some more information about it, but I know that that's how girls hockey came into being. I know that's how girls lacrosse came into being. And I believe there was a boys' sport, too, that fundraised everything they needed for 2 years, proved that they had the interest. So I'd like to look into that.
Mr. Buckley?
I guess for both that and we're in the middle of the fiscal year right now, so where would it come from?
Right. Just put it on our tab, Bill.
Right, I know.
Yeah, I think, I'm hearing a consensus. I think that all of these decisions need to be part of a broader discussion involving as much of the athletics personnel and the boosters and a less than quorum of school committee to really dig into. So I think the prudent move is to table votes until we can start that, be further along in that process, unless there are objections to that.
Would we have a timeline for, just seems like we're kind of letting it float.
Well, definitely before town meeting, because
Yeah,
that will be
I
part
think
of our...
this spring would be, I mean, right away, right? This is not something I think we want to sit on for the long term. Mrs. Gallivan? did you
Yeah, I
have
would
something?
even suggest try to have us meet before February vacation and a meeting with the boosters soon after. I mean, I think we're talking about trying to get a lot of people together, so getting it on people's calendars would be a good idea, too. That would be my timeline.
So do we have a motion to table both of these items? Is that what we're?
I would motion to table both.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mrs. Gallivan. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Thank you for providing the information that you gave us tonight. Is this your first time coming in front of school committee?
Oh, he's been.
or-
Yeah, I've done that a couple times.
Been before. Maybe it's just my first time. It's been a while. Anyway, it's great to have this information. I think you've given us a lot to think about and a really good jumping off point for some rich discussion, so. And we will endeavor not to keep you hanging on the coaches in particular.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You've been able to dodge us. You've been able to dodge us. Some other people aren't that lucky.
If there are any citizens' comments this evening, I suspect they might be in regard to the topic we just discussed. Would I be right about that? Is there anyone who's planning on making citizens' comments this evening?
I appreciate Ron Dowd's information and being very detailed about the needs. I think they are very honest and reasonable needs. And I think I can speak for at least the track and cross-country boosters that we would be thrilled to have a conversation more in depth about what we provide, what we would like to see as far as providing uniforms and figuring out these bus issues, and just going forward, knowing, for parents, their booster fees and what would be reasonable. And we can even talk to the members of our booster club and bring it up at our February meeting, just beginning of the month, and kind of share that with them, get their feedback.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to the superintendent report.
That's right.
Thank you.
We had a very successful Ed Camp for our staff a couple Fridays ago, January 12th. And as I mentioned, the day was designed to provide this professional development for our educators, and we had a lot of educators from our staff that presented, as well as some outside. Theme I mentioned was elevating student voice, and I put together some workshop descriptions and handed those out to you. So hopefully when you get some time, you can take a look at them, because they are very, very impressive. This morning, we had our first Planning for Success session that was held by Dr. Ruth Gilbert Whitner. It was, I have to say, it was fantastic. I know a few of you were there. She really explained the process about planning for success, how that varies from, the strategic plans that we've been doing, I don't know, probably as long as I've been here, right? And I thought what was great was that she did a Back to the Future activity where she said, okay, you're in, 2029. What do you see for your district? What do you, think for your district? And then after doing that, saying, okay, now you're going to look back at the past, which was 2024, and look at how you envision 5 years later. So really seeing what themes that were starting to emerge. I don't know, Carrie, Nancy, and Kristen, if you had any feedback from this morning.
I thought it was great. I mean, I've been involved for at least 10 years, I think, for strategic plan, and I think this was a really good way to do it, to sort of do more broad visioning and then get to the details, instead of, I think, sometimes we've done it the other way around, right? We're working for something that's detail-oriented and kind of editing it versus this big visioning, so I thought it was great.
Yeah, I would say similar. I think that it was good to get a strategic plan in place that we bought into, we did, but I think that this was a really important refresh, a really good one.
I think people were energized. The feedback was very well received. I also gave you a handout because Walpole Schools, we were highlighted in this week's MECO news, and like I said, I gave you a copy. The students in our MECO, Walpole MECO program spent a day in Boston. They called it with a travel buddy from the district, from Walpole. So they took in a college tour and learned about the classes and the programs, and then they also visited MECO headquarters and took a tour of the building and looked at the historical exhibit, so that was great. I also want to mention tiered focus monitoring. They're kind of the old, what we talk about, audits that we used to have, the special education audit, the English learner education audit, but now they call it tiered focus monitoring, so I refer to it as TFM. So DESE has, through their Office of what's called Language Acquisition, they conducted, we're near the end of the tiered focus monitoring, the TFM, for our ELE program. That's every 6 years to monitor the compliance with both the districts and charter schools to make sure that we're complying with our English learner education laws and regulations. So it's a mammoth undertaking. And they also, parent outreach is important. We just completed the TFM for special education, and Dr. Hahn is finishing up the Every Student Succeeds Act, TFM, and that's Title I, Title II, and Title IV all together. So I just want to know, you typically do not do 3 TFMs in a year. Usually it's one a year later or a couple years later, staggered out. So this is really unprecedented. So it is a mammoth undertaking. I have to thank Dr. Gwilly, Joe Kimball, and Dr. Hahn for getting all of this done in on time. So it's just an incredible amount of work with everything else that we're doing in terms of middle school, high school, and educating our students. Some upcoming events, Superintendent Cabinet, that's going well. Next month, we're having bullying and cyberbullying intervention training with Sarah Scales from Johnson Middle School. So she's going to do a 2-session training with those students. Title I night, January 31st, 5:30 to 7:30 at Boyden Elementary School. Next Thursday, I'm going to be attending a Walpole High School mock trial at a courthouse. I'm really excited. They've said they've been doing really well, so I'm looking forward to that. Reminder Extended Day Program is offering the February vacation camp. Mr. Patey already talked about the Walpole Scholarship application. Trivia night, I don't know if anybody's in on February 2nd, but I know there's some tables.
Defending champ, right here.
If the Zyrex are going, I think I might be at their table again because they're like a whiz at trivia night, so.
Good partnership.
Yes, yes. And you can pre-order pizza this year, so, for your tables. And kindergarten registration reminder. Get those in, please, please, please. And I'm going to wait for the legislative breakfast because Nancy Gallivan's been putting that whole thing together, so I know she can explain it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Dr. Goff? Moving on to old business, revote of the corrected 24-25 school year calendar. And we are all sitting up here with a little bit of egg on our faces because not a one of us caught that Indigenous Peoples' Day / Columbus Day was on our calendar the week prior to when it actually falls in 2024.
Just trying to get through today, you know?
Right. Hopefully everyone can give us some grace on that. And so as far as I know, that is the only change to this version of the calendar as compared to the one we voted last time.
And the early release day.
And the subsequent, I mean, the preceding early release day, the Friday before. Yes. Mr. Breen.
Motion to approve the amended calendar for 24-25.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Breen, second by Mr. Buckley. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Thank you. And next is the middle school building project update.
We are still on time and on budget, so.
I did, Dr. did a tour today with our transition.
Middle School Unity Transition Committee.
There you go. It's amazing. Like every week, something's coming along. And I have to say, the work that the staff transition committee is doing is incredible. So everything from staff transition to student transition, communication, core values, unbelievable. So we're rolling.
Great. Anything further on the middle school? On to the high school project update. Mrs. Sirek?
So we had our regular meeting today. Not a lot of things that have changed. We're still on time to get the designs in, end of February. They go out to bid in July. There'll be 2-3 budgeting in there to see what the costs look like, cost estimates. And we discussed a little bit at the meeting about the phasing that we all voted on last meeting, that is part of the plan. We're doing a full design, but they're looking at, when they go to budgeting or to costing it, what the phases could look like.
I just add that we got some detailed information from the town administrator about planned funding sources for the project. And so we are, as I said, I think a couple meetings back, although we were asked to prioritize, we're not, based on the current funding picture, looking at needing to cut from what we decided as a group needed to be included in that project. And so we will just keep chugging along and seeing how things progress.
Yep. It's being designed and planned as if the whole thing's going to happen, but with the understanding that there's that potential.
Thank you. Anything else on the high school? Okay, next is subcommittee activity. The curriculum meeting, what occurred before last meeting, right? We talked about curriculum.
Yes, we did.
Mrs. Gallivan, do you want to share legislative updates?
Yes. We have a firm date of Thursday, February 8th at 9 a.m. at the high school. All five of our senator and our 4 representatives are going to be there. We also have a firm commitment from an awful lot of people on the select board and on the finance committee, so we'll be very well represented. I'm in the process of putting together an agenda, and I think the main topics that we want to talk about, but I wanted to hear from you guys, is the tremendous growth in the special ed budget, the need for better oversight of the OSD, the rate-setting group that is controlling the private schools, and explaining to them the fact that in addition to the percentage increase on tuition, that we're getting hit with bills for one-on-one aides and nurses, which previously had been part of the tuition. And then the third piece is about the fact that, unfortunately, the passage of the Voc Tech school took up all of the benefit that they worked to get us last year, and that we're not, in each of these cases, we're not alone. On the North Shore, a bunch of communities just voted down a Voc Tech school this week, and it's because the towns can't afford it. So I don't know if there's going to be any move at the state level to address the cost of vocational education in the state the way it had been previously. But those are my 3 main agenda points from the school department. And, we're looking for some cooperation and relief. They've been wonderful to us in the past. And I am, moderately optimistic. Well, I'm confident that the conversation will go well. What they'll be able to do is a whole nother story. But I also think that the governor helped us out a bit the other day. So those are the topics.
We'll be at the high school.
High School Media Center? Okay. Yep. There's going to be a light breakfast starting at 9 o'clock, and we'll be out by 10:30.
Thank you very much for putting that together. I know it's not easy to coordinate all of those schedules.
No, they were incredibly responsive, and, just like everything else, staying in good communication and treating people professionally goes a long way for when you want them to answer their phones. So it's a good thing.
Any other subcommittee activity? Moving on to warrants, donations, and minutes. Mrs. Rogers, would you like to take the warrants?
Sure thing. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrants. 2524 PS for $1,954,353.95. The other payroll warrant is 2426 PB for $439.21.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Rogers, second by Mrs. Cyrek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the following accounts payable warrant, 224028 for $126,678.34.
Second.
And there's one more, accounts payable.
Oh, do those combined? Okay. Accounts payable for warrant 224029 for $159,133.34.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Rogers, second by Mrs. Cyrek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the food services warrant 224029 for $12,966.15.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Rogers, second by Mrs. Cyrek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
And finally, a motion to approve the Student Activities Fund, warrant number 224029 for $13,458.93.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Rogers, second by Mrs. Syrek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Next are the gifts and donations.
I will take those. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations to the Boyden School and Fisher School from Bay State Textiles for the total amount of $298.50. System-wide from Bobby's Auto Service for $1,215. For Elm Street School and Johnson Middle School from Box Tops for a combined total of $82.50. For Bird Middle School and Fisher School from Shutterfly for a combined total of $3,602.68.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Syrek, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Lastly, the minutes.
Madam Chair, make a motion to approve the January 9th, 2024 Curriculum Subcommittee meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
Madam Chair, make a motion to approve the January 11th, 2024 School Committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
And Madam Chair, make a motion to approve the January 16th, 2024 Public Budget Hearing meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Buckley, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Breen, second by Mrs. Syrek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.